Hey Kidmin Nation, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Amber Pike, the editor at Kids Matter magazine. But I've also been serving in the ministry since I was 16 years old. God called me into the ministry when I was serving at VBS the summer I was 16. And 13 years later, I'm still at it. But now I'm the director of family ministries at my church. And God really made me for small church settings. That one-on-one relationships with the kids is what I crave and what I thrive on. So when I got at my current church about 7 years ago, there was a third grade boy there who didn't want to be at church anymore. Mom and Dad confided in me when I started that he was miserable. He didn't have friends. He was in between age groups, so there weren't no other kids his age. And so I really was intentional with trying to connect with him. And one Wednesday before church, he and I had a very intense, very epic game of basketball using a laundry basket and a beach ball. And that was all it took. From then on, he was my buddy. He was glued to my side. When I taught, he was literally right beside me. He sat by me in worship. There was even an event where all the other kids backed out, and it was just going to be him and my 2-year-old son. And he still wanted to go. He wanted to hang out with us for the day, and he walked through the zoo holding my 2-year-old's hand, and it was adorable. But when it came time for him to move to youth group, I was really nervous because not only was one of my favorite kids, yes, we're not supposed to have favorites. Yes, we totally do. One of my favorite kids was going to be leaving me, but I was really worried that he wasn't going to stay engaged to the youth group. Again, he was in between age groups, and the current youth group was mainly juniors and seniors, a lot of which who were really rough around the edges. And there was one other kid near his age, but he wasn't super consistent. And then this kid, my favorite one, he missed out on sports a lot. And because neither were super consistent, I was worried that both of them would just stop coming and they wouldn't engage. And unfortunately, I was right. So I saw one of my favorite kids pretty much stop coming to church. And I took a look at what we were doing. And what we were doing to help bridge that connection from youth group or from children's ministry to youth group. I don't want any of my babies to become one of those 2/3 kids, one of those statistics that leave the faith altogether. So I knew that they were being taught Bible-based, solid curriculum. They were being taught apologetics and theology in the children's ministry. They had a leader, myself, and Sunday school teachers and helpers that were connected to them. They had that relationship. They knew that they were known and they were loved by us. But something was not connecting from children's ministry to youth group, and I needed to figure out what it was, and I needed to change it. So the youth pastor and I sat down and we came up with some ideas on how to fix things. And we made it a point for him to stop by once a month, at least, in children's church and visit with the kids. Maybe tell a joke, help out with a game. He was going to bring some teens with him. And then because all of our teens help at VBS during the summer, we thought it was a perfect chance to have just a really fun event for the kids that were moving up into youth group to get to know the youth that were already there. But all these plans didn't really pan out very well. And the youth pastor actually started to have some problems at our church. He wasn't doing well there. Families were not sending their kids to youth group. Some of them were leaving. The kids weren't learning. He was actually creating a toxic environment with his attitude. I would hear the teens say things like, the old people at our church don't like us. They don't want us here. That was not the truth. It was an attitude reflection of his and some incidents he didn't handle well. So it led to him leaving the church. But not only did he just not leave on great terms, but he left a broken and hurting youth group. So the personnel committee appointed one of our moms to step up as an interim. She'd done this in the past. And they began to look for a new youth pastor. Now we're Baptist and we have committees. It was a slow process. After almost a year, they still had no prospects to hire a full or part-time youth pastor, and they just wanted Leanne, this mom, just to do it from now on. Now, she's awesome with the teens, but she's a mom with 2 kids, and she has a full-time job. She didn't have the time to commit to it. And it really burdened me that the committee thought that 10 hours a week was more than enough to help our teens, to shepherd our teens. So she and I, we work really well together. We got together and we came up with a plan that the committee and the pastor wholeheartedly supported, where she would stay on as the part-time associate director of youth ministry. And I would be over her, as well as still taking care of the children and now adding the nursery to my responsibilities as the director of family ministry. And one of the first things that we wanted to do was to smooth that transition from children's ministry to youth ministry. But actually, while we were trying to solve some other problems, we naturally solved that problem. And I can't take credit for it, but there were 6 areas that I really noticed that made a really big difference. Number 1, your kids need to know the youth pastor. Now, Leanne had been serving at the church before I even started working there. The kids knew her. They loved her. They're now familiar with the youth leader because they know her. And this is more than a pop in once a month and tell a joke kind of thing in children's church. Even though she's still over the youth, she still pops in for children's church. She helps probably at least once a month. But they see her at dinner. They see her in the hallways. They have events together. They hang out together. They know her. So now when they get ready for youth group, they know the youth leader. They're not worried or intimidated to go in because they know her. They're comfortable with her. Even when I'm out sick, sometimes she will pop in and be the sub. It's really important for the teens to know, the kids to know the youth leader. And in addition, number 2, to knowing the youth leader, they need to know the other youth. So this is that problem that we solved while trying to solve something else. We noticed that our teens were really struggling to sit through a sermon. And bless their hearts, they just couldn't even make it for 30 minutes without going to the bathroom 3 times. They didn't know how to worship. So I got special permission to have a 4-month-long service during children's church time where the teens would come and join us. So kids and teens together were learning about worship. But more than that, they were building relationships. The teens who didn't know me got to know me because not all of them had gone through the children's ministry. But the kids and the teens got to hang out together. And honestly, this was one of the best things that we have done on so many levels because a year later, I still see the kids and the youth are hanging out. The kids are sitting at the youth table at dinner and vice versa. They're on the couches together before services. And it's genuine. After Sunday school, I am bombarded by teens wanting to help in children's church that day, and it's not just so they don't have to sit through the sermon. We have one boy, a 16-year-old, big old football player, and he's one that did not come through the children's ministry while I was there. So we didn't have a connection before. He has such a gift with kids. My favorite is one Sunday he was helping in children's church, and one of our little 4-year-old grandkids that come every once in a while just wasn't having it that day and needed to go back to grandma. So I asked Luke to walk her back to grandma. Now, most 16-year-old boys are going to feel a little uncomfortable around a crying 4-year-old. They might try to awkwardly shove them out of the room, take them back to grandma. Not him. He bends down, scoops her up, pops her on his hip, and walks to grandma. Just so comfortable with kids. This is one of those amazing benefits that we got from this youth service that we did because the kids and the teens are developing relationships. Now, they still want their separate times, and we're really clear to honor that. We have rules in place, so it's not always the kids with the youth, but for the most part, they actually like being together. Number 3, just that the kids need to know the youth leader, your teens need to also see that you're still part of their life. Those kids in youth group, a lot of them used to be your kids. So it shouldn't feel like now that they've moved up that they've been kicked out and forgotten about. They still need to know that that you are part of their life, that you're a presence in their life, even though you're not the main presence anymore. So I make it a point to pop into Sunday school and I talk to them. I sit with them at dinner. We hang out in the hallways before services. Obviously, those who are helping in children's church or helping at VBS are still plenty connected with me. But more than just when they're serving, that they need to know that you still care about them, that they're not forgotten about them. I'm also really intentional about making sure that I get over there to teach them every once in a while. Leanne and I will switch places, or if she's going to be out of town, I will get someone to cover my class so I can go hang out with the teens. So whether or not you are over the teens, I really encourage you guys to switch places every once in a while so that everybody's comfortable with everybody. I also go to events. The teens were doing a retreat this winter, and they didn't know that I had actually planned most of the retreat. And right before the event, one of my girls that used to be in the children's ministry, she comes and goes, "Miss Amber, you have got to come this weekend. It's going to be so fun." They wanted me there because I'm still a part of their lives. Statistically, we know that kids that have one or more adult in their life have a greater chance of remaining in the church and in the faith. So even after your kids move on to youth group, show them that you're still one of their people. Number 4, you need to be intentional and clear about who events are for. When we looked at our family makeup, we saw that we had families that had kids in the nursery, in the elementary, and in the youth group. So imagine that you're having an Easter egg hunt for the kids at 1, and then you have a youth event that follows at 2:30. What do you think is going to happen? Well, everybody's going to come at 1, and mama's just going to hang out because she's not driving the kids home just so the youth can have their thing. And this is what we were seeing was happening. We had a hayride at one of the family's houses, and that family had 2 kids of their own in the children's ministry. So families would come, and they just brought their kids with them because it was their church friend's house. And we had all these kids that wanted to hang out with a youth because teens are super cool for kids. But these teens had invited their friends and wanted to just hang out with their friends, and they were kind of miserable. So we realized then that we needed to be very clear with who events were for. So if you're having an event for teens, no kids allowed. Not even youth leader kids. Sorry. But sometimes we've decided to shake things up and we have events for kids and teens or family events. We did this with our fall festival. Normally it had been a children's event where the youth would just come and help and I'd give them candy. But this year we switched it and we made it a family festival. We had a chili potluck. We rented a big bounce house, and it wasn't just for kids. We actually had grandparents going down the obstacle course. It was so much fun. Everyone loved it. But we were very clear and intentional with who the event was for. Number 5, get on the same page with your youth pastor. When several of my kids had moved up to youth group, I noticed that spiritually, these kids that just moved up were at a different place than the kids that were already there. Because of the shifts in youth pastors over the years, there were some gaps in their education. So as my role changed, I knew that I needed to get the kids and the youth on the same page spiritually. The youth hadn't been taught Bible history. They were lacking the foundation that the children's ministry had. You don't want to send kids into youth group, kids that are stronger in their faith or biblical knowledge, into a youth group that's teaching below their level. And just as the same, you don't want to send kids into youth group who go in and they're so confused they've got no idea what's going on. Work with your youth pastor to create spiritual goals that span from birth to adulthood. The ultimate goal is to see kids in a lifelong, authentic relationship with Christ. And there needs to be a seamless education in learning from children's ministry to youth ministry, all the different age groups. No one needs to be left behind feeling overwhelmed or bored out of their minds. And number 6, you need to create a team of people that are investing in the kids at all ages of ministry, from the babies in the nursery to the elementary and the children's ministry, teens, and youth group. We have leaders that serve in nursery and go as camp chaperones. We have Sunday school teachers that work a Sunday in nursery. We have adults that teach at VBS and help at youth events. Our music minister, actually, is one of the adult male chaperones for the youth at camp. This is so amazing for our kids and our teens. They have people all throughout their time at church. It's constant. There's a team of people investing in their lives that care about them, so they don't have to worry, oh man, I'm never going to get to see Miss Charlotte again. Or who's Mr. Jake? Why is he driving the bus? Because they know them and they see them throughout their different stages in ministry. Now, I so wish I could take credit for this, but this was actually something that happened all on its own in this beautiful awesomeness at our church. And when I sat back and I noticed this, it made me start to intentionally try to keep pushing this forward because it is so awesome. So what if the kids in your ministry are known by a group of people all throughout their time in church? What if they have people in the nursery that also serve when they're in the children's ministry and then they're in the youth ministry? Lifelong people invested in their lives. How awesome would that be? Because your job as a children's ministry leader isn't just to love them, teach them about Jesus, and send them on to youth group. Your job's not even just to prepare them for youth group. Your job is to prepare them for a lifelong, authentic relationship with Christ, to guide them. So work with your youth pastor. Work together on keeping kids engaged, especially in those critical junctures between children's ministry and youth group, and then when they're exiting youth group. Make sure that your kids know that they are loved by leaders in your church. Maybe it's just you and your youth pastor, or maybe you have a whole team of youth ministers, volunteers, small group leaders, whoever it is. Make sure that the kids know that they are known by them, that they are not forgotten by them. Make sure that they are being seamlessly taught spiritual truths, that you've got a goal, a system in place to get them from birth all the way until they're an adult. And make sure that they know that they are loved by a Savior that died for them. Prepare them not just for youth group, but beyond.